Natasha, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me, even though you don't know me as such. We've never really met properly. But obviously I know your book, Coming Home, which is an absolute delight. It's one of my favourite 3P books. It's really beautiful. So thank you so much for giving me your time to have this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to meet you.
So would you like to start by just saying a little bit about yourself, who you are, and who you are in the world, and who you are as a writer, because that's what we're really interested in here.
Well, I've been interested in spirituality and psychology since I was a child, and very quickly started. My mom was a psychiatric nurse, and she had lots of psychology books on the shelves. So I would go into them and read them, and I had some spiritual experiences as a child that really that I couldn't explain. And every time I tried to get hold of an adult saying, I experienced this, they would go, no, that's just your imagination. But something in me just knew that what I had experienced was true. So that knowing of truth actually began in me quite early, and I was kept searching for when and where can I find that again, what resonates with me. And so it started a search from teenager, really, in this whole area of spirituality and psychology. And I stumbled across the principles in 2012 through a dear friend, Kimberly Hare from England, who told me about the 3 principles, and she invited me to come and spend a weekend with Michael Neal in London. So he was the first teacher that I met, and I kept looking at him, going, "What's he doing? What's going on here? Why is that working?" I couldn't suss it out, but I was really intrigued, and so that led me further in to doing something with Aaron Turner and other teachers. And then in 2014, I really didn't feel like I really met someone or something that really touched me as a teacher. And I really wanted a teacher. And then my friend Kim, she said, well, come to the conference in London, and you'll see all sort of the great teachers, and let me do something for you there. And I was like, well, all right, I'll give it one last chance. And so she brings me along, and we're sitting there, and Dicken goes up and does a 45-minute talk, and he blows me away. I'm like, oh my God, that's my teacher. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And what he does so beautifully is bridge the spiritual and the psychological. He did it in such a way that resonated deeply with me. And so 2 weeks later, my husband and I go to Sweden and spend a weekend with Dicken and Kwesi there, where Dicken is teaching a course for about 80 people. And I just knew that, we went out to dinner the first night of the seminar, and we were just talking constantly. It was like, I don't even know if anybody else said anything. But whatever he or I said, the other person would go, well, me too. I've read that book, or I've done that course. It was like, so when we gave each other a hug saying goodbye, he said, we are kindred spirits. And I said, yeah, I know.
Oh.
And so then the next day after the seminar ended, I said, would you please be my mentor? And he said, I'd love to. I don't really have time right now, but write me an email and we'll see. So I wrote him the next day, Monday morning. And he said, can you start Thursday? I'm like, yes. It just felt right. So that was a little bit about my journey into the 3 principles. And before then, this keen interest in psychology and spirituality. So I became a psychotherapist and was finished with my education at 25. So I started my own company, which was basically doing therapy with people. Got a place and created these sessions with people. And quite soon I was invited to do some trainings in communication and psychology and things like that. And so I started doing that. So, and then that became more and more business oriented. So within, I think, 2 or 3 years of being self-employed, I became a business consultant and did almost 100% of everything I did was in organizations, doing executive coaching and lots of trainings in businesses. So that was my bread and butter for years and years and years. And the therapy part became less and less. And yeah, I've had my company for 1st of January. I'll have had it 25 years.
Oh, congratulations.
No, that's kind of fun. But
Yeah.
if I just jump back into meeting Dicken and starting our mentoring, I had bought 8 sessions from him, and we had the first session, and I wrote down what we were talking about, and then I sent him an email saying, this is what I heard in our conversation, and he would write something back, and then we'd have the second conversation next week, and again I would be so inspired, and I really like to hear things and then try and write it, like, what did I hear? And it was beautiful and so generous of Dicken to write me back and go, yeah, you heard that right, and da 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 da. And then I would answer his email like, well, that makes me think da 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 da. So in between our sessions, there was like all these emails. I mean, and long ones too. And so after the 4th session, I mean, I'd been wanting to write a book since I was quite young, and I knew that I would. There was this just, again, knowing that one day I'd write a book. But I was reading and reading and reading. At one point, I was the head librarian at a big spiritual library, just with spiritual books. I read everything. So in a way, I felt it's all been done. It's all been said. What can I possibly come with? And I promised myself I'm not going to write anything until I have something original to say, something that where my voice will sort of come through in a way that hasn't been written before. And so I looked at all of these emails between Dicken and I. So on our this was after the 4th session, the idea started coming into my head. You should write a book with Dicken. And of course, me? Are you kidding? He's studying with Sydney Banks for 23 years, and I've studied 2 years at that point. But I mean, there's just no way. And it kept coming back, and it kept coming back, and I kept pushing it away. And at our 5th session, I said, Dicken, these emails, they're beautiful. And the thought comes to mind of writing a book together. And he says, I've been thinking the same thing. I was like, what? You know, I couldn't believe he was saying that. I remember checking it actually on the next session. Did you really say that? I wanted to make sure that I had.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. So we finished the 8 sessions. And by the way, all 8 sessions were about one subject, consciousness. I never was interested in talking about me or anything about my life. I just like, let's talk about consciousness. Well, let's talk about this aspect of consciousness and that aspect of consciousness. It's all I cared about. And I think that resonated deeply with Dicken, because that's, you know, one of his favorite subjects, love and consciousness, which of course is the same, but that was what we were sharing with each other. We were sending each other poetry and things that touched us, or little parts of books that we had read. So it was really this beautiful sharing and collaboration. So then after the 8 sessions, I sat down and I'd started recording some of the sessions because they were so beautiful, and I had all of these emails. So I began to sort of put them into something that looked like rough chapters. And then we agreed to meet. So my husband and I made the trip to Lacona. And what we did, I remember the first session we had around our book was we took all the pages that were done and we spread them out on the floor. It was like a big puzzle, and there was papers everywhere. And we had a big scissors and some tape, and we would start cutting and pasting and throwing away. And gosh, we threw a lot away. I mean, I was in the beginning, I was like, no, this is good. And he would just go, yep, it is, but it's not fresh enough. So, I mean, I think we started with 200 pages, and I thought, God, this book is going to be done in a couple of months. But we kept throwing away and throwing away and throwing away and writing new things, because we were both committed to having it be true. And we were committed to having both of us knowing the truth of what was coming out. So there was this deep commitment to truth and to it feeling right for both of us. And that really kept us completely aligned. And we got very sensitive to any time that something didn't feel true, or it felt intellectual. We would go, no, I'm not feeling it. And as soon as either of us said, I'm not feeling it, we would go, throw it away. So that was really how it started, and very much the way that we worked was to this commitment to truth and to it feeling that the feeling had to be there.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love what you said, because it so resonated with me. The same thing for me was that I knew for years that I was going to write a book, but I didn't know what it was going to be about even. And I also knew it needed to be something that wasn't already out there. That was the way that I saw it. So that really resonated. And then just how just you writing emails to Dicken, how, like, we never know where a book is going to come from, do we? So that's really lovely. So had you just started? Was that the start of your writing, or did you used to write in any way, shape, or form before that? Just...
Well, I've been writing articles for years to different Danish business magazines. So they would always ask me to write like 2-3 page articles. And what I was always trying to do was to try and take this sort of soft psychological, soft, even spiritual things that I knew even before the principles, and put it in a way or a shape or a form that business people would be able to read without rejecting it. And so that became my MO in a way, that it was that I was known in the field, I still am, I guess, in Denmark, as the one who takes things that are sort of soft but makes them logical, or makes them go down easier. That way. So that's always been, and it's always been my passion to take something really complicated, a big psychological theory, for instance, and make it really simple, make it really practical. I really wanted to make it, so that people could resonate with it on a practical level. And that's one of the things that I think also made mine and Dicken's collaboration so great, is that I'd been listening to Dicken a lot, and he's, when he speaks and he's in front of people, he gets inspired and he goes into this story and then he shares that. And what I said to him is, we need to sort of make it building things on top of the other. So I was very good at going, that's wonderful, that's beautiful, and let's just bring it down to earth. Let's look at it. How can we say that in a way in writing? Because you can get away with a lot of things when you're speaking with people, because you're sitting there, you can see them, they can see you can see their facial expressions, they can ask questions, they get touched, I get touched. So in a book, you don't have the audience in the same way. And so I think I was very good at taking sort of Dickens, a lot of his ideas, and going, okay, let's make them easy for people to read and to understand. So it was very much a collaboration of Dicken very often, especially when we would stop. And I know that he shared this as well. If it didn't feel right, we'd go stop, and we'd either go for a walk, or we would take a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit, because that always helps. Or sometimes I would say, do your thing. And he goes, okay. And then he would lie back on the couch. This was when we were in the same room. He'd lie back on the couch, close his eyes. And I would usually just sit, I would look through some things. I'd sit with the computer and look through some things. And then suddenly he would, get up like this. And then he would start speaking. I mean, it sounds like channeling or something. He would start speaking, and I would write as fast as I could. And then when he was done, he'd say, what did I say? And so he would have to read through it. There was no way he could remember what he just said. But those times, oh my gosh, that was so beautiful, and they were spot on. I don't think we ever had to change any of that. Whenever it came from that space, it was spot on. The funny thing was that almost every single time it happened, I would be writing, just doing something practical with what we'd just done. And then just before he opened his eyes, I would have this flash, I've got it. And then he would start saying it. And what I got in an instant was the same thing that he would then say in words. Like I
Wow.
had the feeling. We had
Yeah.
it happen so many times. It got spooky. We would be on different parts of the planet, and sometimes we would sort of challenge each other to say something about, write something about meditation. What do you think about meditation? So both of us would write, and then we would send it to each other, and it would be like it's the same document.
Wow.
It's it's like we tapped into some sort of source of truth that we just both were in touch with. And that's why the book is so congruent and so like in one voice,
Yeah, I
because
love
we,
that
we sort
about
of
it.
we felt, or we got the inspiration from the same space. And of course it had nothing to do with us. It was like there was no Natasha, there was no Dicken in that space. It was simply tapping into some sort of truth that is timeless and that has nothing to do with us. It really did not feel like we were in the picture. And whenever we got in the picture, it was rubbish. It was, that would spoil it. But either Dicken or I would say, wait a minute, we're in the way here. Let's do something different. Let's take a break.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there about, because a lot of writers would, if something was coming out in the writing that didn't feel right or wasn't saying what they wanted, they'd have a lot of thinking about, I'm doing this wrong, or, and why am I doing this, and all that kind of thing. But even from the conversation with Dicken, we got this as well. But it seems like for the both of you, like you didn't let any of that kind of thinking get in your way.
No, it was obvious that it had to feel in a certain way, and we were both sensitive to that feeling. So if it wasn't there, we knew that we might as well throw it out. In the beginning, I was more reluctant than Dicken was. I was like, no, let's tweak it. Let's look at it again. And he goes, nope, throw it out. All right. So we did. So the 124 pages that the book is pure. It's as pure as it gets in terms of really both of us can say we were not in the way here. And it's so funny because I'm often asked to join book clubs, to tell about the process or different things around the book. So every time I need to pick it up again and then read it. And I just this summer I actually recorded it to a Danish audiobook. Dicken and I
Nice.
we'll make it into an English audiobook as well as soon as we can see each other. But I did make a Danish audiobook, and as I was reading through it, because I had to read through it, of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't change a word. That it's because we joked at the time when we just finished in 2016, I guess. We joked that, well, in a year or two we'll rewrite it and we'll go through it and we'll put it out again. It's like, no, I don't want to change a word.
Well, that's so almost unique. That is, because I know certainly with my books, like if I was doing them again, my first book, it would be a different book if I was writing it now, because completely coming from a different place. But even the one that I published in the summer, it's like it still needs a bit of editing, really. But I'm happy with it. But so for an author to be able to say, a few years down the line, now I wouldn't change a word, that really speaks to how special it is.
Yeah, and we're both open to it. It's not like we would mind if we had to do that. It's that every time either of us, because we've talked about this, either of us pick it up for some reason, it's like, oh. And the second thing that's really interesting is that, we both share a lot on webinars and conferences and different things, and every time we do, we always share from what feels new and fresh to us. That's I guess everybody does, but and then I'm like, oh, this was a new insight. I want to share this to the world. And then I look in the book, and it's like, it's on page 89. I'd already written it. so very often, when we talk, then I'll say, I've had a new insight, and then and then I'll say, I know I've said this before, but I saw it deeper, and then we just laugh, both of us.
Yeah. Oh. So I'd really like to still really focus in on the writing, is really understand a bit about what's your writing process now. Is it, do you still write on a regular basis? Are you working on another book, for example, or anything like that?
I just finished writing a book as a ghostwriter, and that was pretty much the same process. Although there's a personal story in the book, so each chapter has a part of the chapter which is the personal story of from this woman who I'm writing for. And then what she wanted was that I write the three principles perspective that she has now. So it's her insights. So we're writing her insights. So we're having conversations in a way like Dicken and I. It's just that she doesn't feel like she has the gift of writing, but she knows what she's seen. So I will kind of interview her. So what do you? We'll read through the chapter that's there, like some part of her story, and I'll say, what do you see about that now? And she'll say, well, now I have had this insight about it. It's like parenting, or the way she eats, or the way she interacts with other people. And then she'll tell me, and then I will write it, and then she'll read through it and go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say, or no, that's not exactly what I wanted to say. Could we tweak it this way? So I'm doing the writing, but with her insights. It's been very enjoyable. I never thought in a million years that I'd ever be somebody who's ghostwriters, but it's like when she asked me, she said, have you ever ghostwritten before? I said, no. And I was like, and neither am I. And then I said, well, why do you ask? She said, well, I really have a dream of writing a book about the three principles and what I'm seeing now. And I just love your book, and I'd love for you to do it. And then I heard a yes come out of my mouth. I'm like, who said that? But I did, and I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. And I've whenever I just read through it again, because we're finished now, so it's going to the editor, and I love it. It's a perfect combination of sort of the way that I keep to the truth of what I'm seeing, but then with her voice or her coloring into that. I think it's a nice job. I hope people will think so too.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. But it sounds like, from a writer's perspective, it sounds like a fascinating thing to do, to write. Yeah.
It was a lovely challenge, and one that I never thought that I would get the opportunity to do. But it's really taught me a lot about writing, and also being very true to the same principles that I wrote with Dicken about, which is, if it didn't feel right, like if I was not in the mood that day, I wouldn't write. I would simply stop, and then sometimes I'd go, oh, I'm really inspired to write this chapter, and it would be easy.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. I'd like to ask you about with Dicken's book, you managed, I don't know how you do it, or it must be because it comes from that place, but it's one voice. It's like, I've known Dicken for years, and you cannot like differentiate between your voice and Dicken's voice. I think that's amazing. And so, is there anything about doing the ghostwriting, about writing with this lady's voice, or is it the same thing for you?
It was a little different because she and I didn't collaborate in the same way that Dicken and I did. I would more interview her about what she was seeing. I would often record what she said, and then I would listen to the recording, and then I would let myself be inspired by that. Like she would mention one or two lines about relationships, for instance, that she was seeing now, and then I would write a whole chapter around relationships. So I really took my inspiration from what she was seeing, but then I added what I'm also seeing about relationships. Not so much what I'm seeing, but what came out when I started writing, and it would be very surprising sometimes. I really love that, like, oh, that was good. And she would sometimes comment afterwards, oh, I love what you wrote there. That line is just beautiful. I'm like, I didn't do it, but
Yeah.
my fingers did, or something did.
Yeah, something does, doesn't it? That's one of the things that's kept me writing for years and years on end, even without even thinking about writing a book. Like what I see through the writing, what comes through the writing sometimes. And like I've had so many insights just through writing down whatever's coming through me. It's just absolutely fascinating. I love that about it. It's what kind of keeps me going, really, with doing it. So
I think there's something in the creative process, like the way I see the world, or there is only one principle, which is creation. There is only the only thing that's ever happening is creation. This creation is of course creative. Look at what's been created. From humans to animals to nature to all the things in that surrounds us. It's all been created. So there's this. So creation is creative. Creation is aware. There's awareness behind all of creation, and creation is intelligent. There's an intelligence behind creation. It makes sense. There's this deeper knowing of creation. So I see creation as being the only principles that exist, and then I see how whenever any of us tap into that creation, that's going to occur to us to create something from the alignment of it. First of all, it feels amazing to be aligned with creation. And whether it's writing a book, creating a meal, painting a picture like the beautiful painting that the Dickens' wife Coisy does,
yes.
or anything that's been created, it can be anything at all. Creating, my husband's a gardener. He loves creating beautiful gardens. And so when you tap into that, when you're in alignment with creation itself, it feels so alive. It's so much love. It's wise. It just bubbles out of you. And that feeling is almost addictive. I mean, it's like you want to go back to that because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I think that we all have our voice, or our way of tapping into that and being part of the creative process by doing a ton of different things. There's no end to the variety of how we're creative in this world, but it comes from the same source.
Yeah.
Whatever it looks like.
Yeah. I wish like some of the writers that I'm working with are fairly new to, some of them are new to writing, some of them have been writing for a long time, but new to thinking about writing a book. And I know when you talk to so many authors, they talk about it coming from a place that is not, like some people talk about it being a download or taking dictation, or coming from a place where they have no clue where it's coming from, but they know that it does. And a lot of people that I'm working with they have some understanding of the principles, and yet sometimes, like when it comes to the book writing, like we've all got our blind spots, haven't we? Like this is the blind spot. If they, like anybody, when like for me, it's like, it's not that when it happens, I've got faith and trust in it happening. It's like, that's all part of the water when I'm in that place of writing. And I don't actually have to feel good to be able to tap into it. In fact, because they're not feeling good is not something I need to potentially worry about, but it's like, for me, it's like, feels like I can mine no matter how much I'm feeling, but it still comes from that same place. So it isn't that my mind has to be clear as such, but it's like that avenue. I think you talked earlier about when you talked about Dicken, you talked about it being like channeling. It's like that channel is always open regardless of what's going on up here. And the more people can see that, the less likely that they'll have a difficult ride of the journey of writing a book. That's one of the things I love about the conversation with Dicken, and now with you as well, is how how much easier it has been for you because you don't pay so much attention to anything that might be going on up here. I mean, I'd be really interested, you said right at the beginning about, you know, when you had that first idea about writing the book with Dicken, like, you know, about that, I know, the tiny glimmer of insecurity about, you know, what, me write a book with Dicken, like, I'd be the, you know, I'd be like, yeah. You know, that's what would it be? Like, a lot of people might be intimidated by that. So it'd be really, really good to hear you speak about that just a little bit.
Well, luckily I mean, like everybody else, I have insecure thinking. It's just that I've always, I think, been very good at going, well, let's see what happens. Let's try it. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Mm.
You know, if I don't ask, the question's always the answer's always gonna be no. So even when I started my own company at 25, I remember saying to somebody that I wanted to do that, and they said, "You can't do that. You're 25. You can't become a psychotherapist and just start your own company." I'm like, "Watch me."
Yeah.
And so I did, and I've had a really wonderful time for these years. I've done so many things. So it's not that I don't have insecure thinking. I just don't pay attention to it.
Mm.
Thinking comes up just like with everybody else, and I go, well, let me try and see. And of course, now I'm 50, and so when insecure thinking comes up, I know that what it is. I know it's insecure thinking, and so I pay even less attention to it now than I did. But I think I've always been good at it. So when that came up, I just kept going. It feels right. It had that feeling of knowing that this is right. And what was the worst that could happen? He would go, "No, you know what? I don't want to do that." And then that would be it. It wouldn't change. You know, I'd still have 4 mentoring sessions left, and you know, whatever else happened. But yeah.
So do you have plans for another book, or?
For sure, there's something bubbling in me, and I have lots of ideas, and I'm writing down ideas and for chapters and even parts of chapters, and and at some point that might turn into a book. So it feels like I'm pregnant with ideas at the moment, and I have no plans of when or how or when or with who. I'm just bubbling.
Oh, lovely. I love that. Pregnant with ideas. That's so lovely. And the fact that you, like, it looks like something is there. You have all of these ideas, but it's just like sitting with it and trusting that, like, you know, when it's like, this is why I say to people, like, if you've got a book in you, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, you know, like, there's something it's not going to stop it, is it? But the timing of it is not within your control.
No.
It seems to me like the book will come at the time that's right for you. It's interesting to me. So I wrote a book, which I finished. It's had about 3 or 4 drafts already, which I finished in October, but I still haven't done anything with it. In fact, published the other book, The Daily Yarns, in the meantime. That was a surprise. But it's like, at some point, Jules Swales is my writing teacher and writing coach, and early on she said to me something like, "You know, Maria, this book might never get published." And I was like, "What?" You know, there's no way that's not going to happen. Like, but it left me open to it not being published, but it also left me open to it being published when the time's right. So the fact that I haven't touched it for several months, I've gone, like, dipped into it every now and again, just to, it's kind of like I'm just checking on the baby in the crib, and the baby's okay at the minute. But there's some point where I know it's going to come out at some point again, and then I'll take another look at it with fresh eyes, and like, but not pushing it. I'm not going to push it out into the world, because I know this will come in its own time. That's what it sounded like you were saying.
Yeah, it really is the same. I remember, I mean, specifically, Dickens said, just as we started, he said, we have to set our egos aside and just write. And
Mm.
we sort of laughed about that when it was done, you know, our friends and family would probably buy a copy and maybe some clients, but we didn't know, you know, where it would go. And now we have 6, in fact, yesterday I just got an email that it was just uploaded in Hebrew.
Wow.
So that's the 7th language, and I know that the 8th language, which is in Dutch, is more than halfway done. So
Brilliant.
it's who knew?
Mm.
We didn't know, and we
No.
didn't have anything invested in whether we would sell 100 copies or 10,000 copies.
Mm.
That wasn't why we did it. We did it because it felt like that was coming out of us.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important part for authors to get a sense of, is this my ego? Oh, I want to write a book because I want my name on a book or something. Where is it coming from?
Yeah.
Coming from this deep, you know, this pregnancy with an idea that wants to see the world. Well, then, you know, then it will come. And also being sensitive to this feeling of, because sometimes, as you just mentioned before, it's not like we're always part of creativity. We are creation. That's who we are in essence. So it's just that sometimes I'm preoccupied with things and I'm not thinking fresh.
Mm.
And so whenever I'm not, I don't try
Mm-hmm.
and push it. I do something else with my time, even though I had set aside some time to do some writing. I would just do the dishes or go for a walk or do something else and wait until that point where I'm like, okay, get my computer, I'm ready, and then blah blah blah, and then it
Mm.
comes easily.
Yeah.
But,
So would that be the advice that you would give to aspiring authors, or is there anything else?
that's very much it. Like, who is it, who's speaking? I'm sure there's a difference if you're writing a book that's like something about science, or that might be very different, that you would write from a different place. But all the
Mm.
people I know who write in psychology or spirituality or fiction, I have a very dear friend that I speak to once a week, a psychologist, who's written 6 or 7 books now, and he's like me. He's like, he can feel, he'll sometimes he'll set aside a whole week for writing, and he won't write, you know, half a page because it's not there. And then other times when he's really busy, it will come and he'll just have to carve out time. So I think that listening to when is the inspiration here, because then it's easy. If it's difficult, stop. It's not going to be inspired.
Mm.
It's going to be too much of this person trying to get something out, and too little of this one.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Natasha. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so lovely. But I'd just like to finish off by asking you, just if anybody would like to see what you're doing in the world, or speak to you, or see, you know, attend any of your programs. I know you do all sorts of different things. How and where will they find you?
theprinciplesinstitute.com is my website. The
Mm-hmm.
Principles Institute. So that has what I'm doing, and yeah, it has lots of webinars, videos, and different things.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, me too. I love this conversation. Thank you, Maria.